There's been a lot of discussion about jersey numbers and retired jersey numbers in the NFL right here before the 2024 season. Well, Pigskin Dispatch, you know how we love jersey numbers and honoring those who wore them. We're going to have our say on this very unique instance that's happened in New York City, and it's coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And there, like we said at the beginning, at the intro, a lot of chatter has been going on about the New York Giants situation and their young rookie wide receiver, Malik Nabers from LSU, who has decided to wear a number that's some people are raising an eyebrow over. It's a retired number belonging to Ray Flaherty in his honor. But we have some history on it. So before we pass judgment, let's talk about the history of retired numbers and maybe unretired numbers. Let's go backwards in time here. Most recently, in 2021, the family of the legendary Marshall Goldberg of the Cardinals, the Chicago Cardinals, well, their family allowed the number 99 that was put aside in honor of Marshall Goldberg by the Cardinals organization to come out of retirement for J.J. Watt when he was acquired in 2021. J.J. Watt, previously the Houston Texans, wore 99, outstanding Pro Bowl MVP type seasons, ends up getting that number 99 of Marshall Goldberg. 2012, we have another instance. Peyton Manning, who wore number 18 with the Indianapolis Colts for 14 seasons, outstanding quarterback, one of the greatest of all times with the Colts. Well, that number 18 in the Denver Broncos in 2004 was retired in honor of Frank Tripucka. Now, Frank Tripucka himself was still alive and was honored to let Peyton Manning wear that number 18, and Manning wore it well, taking them to a Super Bowl championship eventually. Another instance, 2004, the Seattle Seahawks, after inking the legendary wide receiver, the Mr. Wide Receiver, I should say, Hall of Famer, Jerry Rice. Well, there was a wild story of how Rice was able to wear that number 80. Apparently, the owner of the Seahawks at the time had gone to Steve Largent and told him that the number had been retired from Largent playing in the 70s and early 80s. The owner had told Largent, hey, Jerry Rice would love to wear your number 80 since he's wore it both famously at San Francisco, a little bit in Oakland. And Largent was honored to let, Jerry Rice, this is freaking Jerry Rice, for God's sakes, to let him wear that number. Well, on the other hand, I guess the story goes that he went to Rice and said, hey, Jerry, Steve Largent wants you to wear his number 80. And Rice thinking, hey, I thought the number was off limits. It was retired. No, Steve wants you to wear it. So somewhere in the middle is the truth. It's hard to believe that maybe the owner did that to both people, but maybe he did. But Jerry Rice wore number 80 that was retired on behalf of Steve Largent at the time with the Seahawks. Well, then we come to the New York Giants, sort of where this whole thing centered around. 1961, the number 14, which had previously been retired for their legendary running back, Ward Cuff, was re-released to the playing field when the Giants signed quarterback Y.A. Tittle, and he wore it very proudly for the Giants, having some successful seasons there in the early 60s. In late August of 2024, we come to rookie wide receiver Malik Nabers, who, as the story goes, had wore number 9 going through training camp and through the preseason games, but had to change his number as the season started when he, of course, made the roster. And so did another number 9, who is the punter of the New York Giants. Graham Gano already has that number 9. Usually rookies don't get to take over a number from a seasoned veteran, where they have to pay a handsome fee. But it wasn't worth that to Nabers. He was told to choose another number. The Giants didn't even offer that option. Well, during college, you would think that would be the natural progression. Nabors wore number 8. So that sounds like a good choice to do. But unfortunately for the Nabors and the Giants, well, not for the Giants, but Daniel Jones, the starting quarterback, is number 8. You're not going to take the number from the starting quarterback, who's been somewhat of the face of the franchise now that Saquon Barkley has gone on to Philadelphia. So Mr. Nabors, trying to choose another single-digit number, running out of options, went to John Mara, the owner of the Giants, apparently, and said, hey, how about number 1? I know it's retired, but this number hasn't been used since the 1930s, is what he thought. Really, we'll find out later. That's a little bit out of bounds a little bit. In the 1940s, it was last war. So John Mara, who was not alive when this number was worn, went to the family of the guy it was retired on behalf of, Ray Flaherty, who we just did about a week ago or two on Ray Flaherty and that number being retired on our New York Giants 100 series. Well, Ray Flaherty's family, Ray has long since been passed away from us, but his family said, sure, Nabors can wear that number. So Nabors is wearing number 1. And it's caused quite a hubbub of great historians and people that respect the honor of reserving and retiring numbers for players. There's a reason they're retired, isn't there? But they've also, the Giants, can go on some precedents. I guess one precedent, they could look to another franchise, the Detroit Lions in the jersey number 20. Well, in the late 50s, the 1960s, a guy by the name of Lem Barney, a defensive back who's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, wore number 20 so famously. And when he retired, they sort of put that number aside, didn't really get it out for anybody. It wasn't retired, but it was just reserved in honor of with a wink for Lem Barney for such a great career he had. I don't believe it was officially retired. Well, then along came Billy Sims, a sensation out of college, the number 1 draft pick by the Detroit Lions, had a tremendous couple of seasons till a tragic injury, ended his NFL career, but he wore number 20. So again, it's sort of put on ice until 1987, the 3rd overall pick. The Lions choose Barry Sanders and give him that number 20 that he wore at Oklahoma State, I believe. And Sanders wears it and through his career. And in 2004, the Lions said, okay, enough of this. We've been giving number 20 to our best player basically for the last 30 years or so, 40 years almost. We're putting it on ice. We're officially retiring number 20, but it's not going to go to just Barry Sanders. It's not going to just go to Billy Sims. It's not just going to go to Len Barney. It's going to go to all 3 of them. So all 3 of them are retired at number 20 for the Detroit Lions. Well, there's also a little bit of precedence with the Giants themselves with the number 1 jersey. And here's a recording that historian Larry Schmidt, who is a big-time Giants fan and really digs into the Giants' history with Big Blue Interactive and the Gridiron Uniform Database, had to say about the history of the Giants and the number 1 jersey a couple years ago before this whole Malik Nabers thing came about.
So they retired that number for Flaherty in 35, but the Giants had a tradition where when they started playing in 1925, their featured player or their marquee player that they wanted to draw fans' attention to were given the number 1. So in the Giants' first season in 1925, it was halfback Hinkie Haynes who wore number 1 that season. Then in 1926, Haynes switched his number to 2, and they gave number 1 to fullback and their best passer, Jack McBride. And McBride wore number 1 for the next 3 seasons for the Giants from 26 to 1928. And then McBride left the Giants. He went to Providence, and the Giants had purchased the entire Detroit Wolverine franchise so they could get Benny Friedman to be their quarterback. So obviously, when you buy a whole team to get 1 player, you're going to put number 1 on the back of his jersey.
I guess so.
Yeah, and Benny Friedman in 1929 set the NFL record at that time for 20 touchdown passes which stood for, I can't remember the exact number of years. I know it's that 20 touchdown passes was the record until the 1940s. He had that for almost 20 years.
Wow.
And then Friedman went to the Brooklyn Dodgers, and then Ray Flaherty, who had been on the Giants in 29, but he wore number 44, and then he was on the Giants again in 31. He wore number 6. But Ray Flaherty got the number 1 in 1932, and he wore it until 1935 because he was the team captain, and he was also head coach Steve Owens' first, assistant coach. He was a player coach. So he wore the number 1, and then when he retired as a player, the Giants retired his number 1.
Huh.
What they did in 1946, they unretired number 1 for 2 years. They gave it to Frank Cope, who was a tackle, and he had been on the Giants for over 10 years, and he was a captain, and he had worn number 36 for most of his career, but his last 2 years, they allowed him to wear number 1. And then when he retired in 1947, no Giant has worn the number 1 since.
Well, there you have it. So maybe the number 1, even though it was the first retired jersey in National Football League history, and the first definitely by the Giants, it was pulled in and out of retirement once before. Like Larry said, 1946, they pulled it out, even though it was retired in 1935 for Flaherty and worn by a player for 2 years. But does that give the right to an unproven rookie? Somebody has a high draft profile, but not an NFL career or resume at all to warrant anything. Does that give him the right to be like Peyton Manning, who everybody knew was going to be a Hall of Famer, or J.J. Watt, who's probably going to be a Hall of Famer, or Jerry Rice, the greatest wide receiver ever, giving him the honor of taking a number out of retirement? I'm not sure that it does. And even the Giants number 1, the Giant that wore it in the 40s, he played for an outstanding amount of time. So what kind of precedence is the Giants setting that you can pull these, hallowed and revered numbers out of retirement that are set aside in the memory of a certain player? I'm not sure that it does, but I don't think it's a good thing. Numbers are retired for a reason. And Mr. Mara and Mr. Nabors should have respected that the number had been retired. Whether it been right or wrong, good or bad, it was retired in honor of Ray Flaherty, and maybe it should stay that way. That's just our opinion, and we love to talk about the history of football, and this is definitely part of it with the jersey history. So we'd love to hear your comments, so make sure you leave comments on the YouTube channel or at pigskindispatch@gmail.com, and we'd love to hear about what you think about this number 1 coming out of retirement for a rookie in Malik Nabers. He could be one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. He could be a bust. We don't know, but we'll soon find out as the Giants and their season starts here in 2024. Till next time, everybody, have a great Gridiron Day. That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.